I'll start off today by saying that many of the ideas and thoughts in today's sermon I am indebted to preacher and pastor David Platt in his book Counterculture. And many of you know David Platt because we studied his book Counterculture here before, but also his books Radical and Radical Together. But to start out one of the chapters of Counterculture, David Platt writes this: shamefully silent and appallingly passive. These are the words that come to mind when I consider my approach to the issue of abortion for the majority of my life as a Christian. Those are strong words of self-judgment, shamefully silent and appallingly passive. And I think if we're honest, many of us can use those same words of judgment about our own selves when it comes to this topic of abortion. Case in point, when was the last time you spoke up for the rights, for the sake of the unborn, to someone you suspected might disagree? When was the last time you contributed money to a pregnancy support center or some other ministry that has as part of its work ministry to women who might be considering abortion? Or when was the last time you gave your time to listen and maybe pray with a woman who might be considering abortion as her last option? I mean, I read that list of questions. It's very convicting, at least for me, and I'm sure it is to many of us, because often we're shamefully silent and appallingly passive when it comes to the topic. But of all the things that we can argue about, discuss, debate in our society right now, abortion is the most urgent. I mean, so sure, go ahead, argue about immigration policy and walls and government shutdowns all you want. But abortion is the issue that causes the most clear and present danger to the most people on a daily basis. Get this, every year, 42 million abortions are performed in the world. That's staggering. That's an average of 115,000 abortions every day. Imagine going out and just rounding up 115,000 kids and just wiping them out. That'll happen today. It'll happen tomorrow. It'll happen every day this year. In the United States alone, in 2016, which is the most recent year we have statistics for, there were 885,000 abortions. That year, there were 30,881 abortions. In Pennsylvania, our very own state, that's an average of 85 abortions being performed in Pennsylvania every day. Since 1973, when the Supreme Court ruled and abortion was legalized in the United States, it is estimated that 60 million babies have been killed by abortion in our country. 60 million people who should be with us and are not. You still want to argue about a wall today? Or are we convicted that our attention has been diverted from much more pressing matters? Are we convicted that our own attitudes toward abortion have been shamefully silent and appallingly passive? You know, often when it comes to abortion, we are shamefully silent and appallingly passive because we say, oh, well, that's a political issue. I don't like being political. Oh, the pastor's getting political during the sermon. I hate it when he gets political. But abortion's not just a political issue. It's a biblical issue about which all of God's children, that's you and me, need to be deeply concerned. Though you won't find the term abortion in the Bible, it's not there. The Bible does speak directly to the issue when it describes the relationship between God as creator and the unborn baby. I told you to turn to Psalm 139. I want you to listen and read along with me if you're there. At Psalm 139, starting at verse 13. It says, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." Jim, go ahead and show us, just to repeat a verse I just read to you, verse 13. "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb." It's what the psalmist is declaring to God, and there's no doubt left by the psalmist in his words here. Who is the creator of the inmost being? Who creates that essence that is as a human person? Who knits each person together in the mother's womb? Not sometime after birth, but in the mother's womb. Who? It's God. God the creator. He alone has power and authority over life. And make no mistake, that's what the psalmist is talking about here, the creation of life. Jim, show us again, verse 16, which we read. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. God says, or the psalmist says, you knew me before I had a foreign body. You knew everything about me before I existed, even one day in a physical way. God adds on to this in Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 5, when God himself declares, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. God is saying he forms the babies in the mother's womb. And even before that, God knows that baby. God knows that baby's life. That baby's life is real, it is known, it is true. Even before the body is formed, when what scientists would say, it's just a mass of cells. God knows that baby. He knows him or her, not it. God knows him or her. The baby is a living human being. And God alone has power and authority to create life. And he chooses to do it in the womb of a woman. The baby is alive in the womb, a beautiful creation by the Almighty God, fearfully and wonderfully made, as the psalmist declares. And Jim, show us what God declares about life. From Deuteronomy, going back to the books of the law, chapter 32, verse 39, God says, see now that I myself am he. There's no God besides me. I put to death and I bring to life. God here, he says, I am the creator of life. God is the sustainer of life, and God is the one who decides when life on this earth ends. Meaning, we humans do not. We don't decide who dies and when according to our own convenience, our own arguments. God says right here, there's no God besides me. He says, I'm sorry, it's not you. You're not God. Now, you can think and feel about this issue all you want, and you know what? God creates us that way. He creates us to be thinking people who feel. So he says, go ahead and think and feel on this topic however you want, but that doesn't mean you get to decide life and death. God says, I give life, and I alone, God says, put to death. So you see all these things that God has given us in his word, and you see how abortion is an affront to God's sole and sovereign authority as the giver and taker of life, like murder and like suicide. Abortion asserts human beings as the ones who control life and death. But God, the Creator alone, has the right to determine when someone lives and when someone dies. And abortion flies in the face of God's authority there. So when it comes to abortion, the key question that must be answered is this: what is contained in the womb? Is it a person? Or is it merely an embryo or a fetus? Practically every other question or argument that we can get to when we talk about abortion is settled by this question: what or who is in the womb? Because once you settle that, everything else just kind of falls into place, doesn't it? Does anyone here know who Gregory Kukul is? That's all right, I probably wouldn't if I weren't a pastor either. But he's a well-known apologist for the cause of Christ in our society right now. And he's out there often answering many of the objections people have to faith in Jesus Christ. And he speaks to them about these things and these different topics. And one of the topics he talks about is this topic of life. And he actually wrote a book about it entitled Precious Unborn Human Persons. And Jim, show us what Gregory Kukul writes on page 7 of that book. He writes, if the unborn is not a human person, no justification for abortion is necessary. He says, if it's not a life, if it's not a person, you don't have to justify doing away with it, because it's just there. It's inconvenient. Just get rid of it. And this is why so many will ignore the biblical assertion that life begins in the womb, in the mother's womb. Even Christians, followers of Jesus, will jump through hoops to try to reinterpret scriptures so that it doesn't say that life begins in the womb. Because if life doesn't begin in the womb, if what's there is not a person, a life, then they're free to back abortion without any guilt, because it's not a matter of life and death. See, God's dominion is not put into question. It's not a life, it's just inconvenient. Do away with it. But Jim, show us please what Gregory Kukul goes on to write. If the unborn is a human person, The no justification for abortion is adequate. If what is in the womb is a person, if it's a human life, then nothing you say can justify killing him or her. If it's a human life, nothing, no argument you make will make it right. It is murder, which is offensive to God. It is self-idolatry, setting yourself up as God, which is offensive to God. If it's a person, a life, the arguments given by someone who might be considered to be pro-abortion or pro-choice, they fall apart. Consider the main argument we are given for abortion. Women should have the right to choose. They should have the right to choose what happens to their own body. And I think we can all agree, we like having the rights to choose. I look out at all you today, and y'all got dressed today and came dressed, but y'all put on whatever clothes you chose to wear, right? And it's interesting, there's like a theme of maroon going on throughout the whole thing. I didn't get the memo, but you all chose what you're going to wear, right? And even in our wardrobe, we like having that opportunity to choose. And when I think about this, I think of my little nieces, Jane and Leah. They're in 5th and 4th grades, and they're still trying to figure out fashion norms, when they're getting dressed. So they'll come down, dressed, ready to go out, and they have the most heinous outfits. Like, they'll come down, and they're so proud of themselves, like these plaid flannel pajama pants and this sparkling sequin pink thing, and they think they look fabulous. And their mom, my sister, she says, and she takes them up and she picks something so that they can wear out, and so people don't think these kids are abandoned or something. But then my nieces, they resent, and they don't get to choose their own outfits, however outlandish they might be, right? Because we like having the right to choose. But we all agree, we shouldn't have unlimited rights to make choices. For example, if teenagers become burdensome or expensive, parents don't have the right to choose to eliminate them. And all the teenagers here say amen, right? Yes. Now I know some of you raised kids, you had teenagers. And you're like, there were times I did think about eliminating them, right? I get it, because we have a teenager in my house. I get that. But I was talking to one of my older cousins once, and she said that she didn't like her daughter from the age of 10 to 16, and she didn't like her son from the age of 15 to 20. She didn't like them, but she did love them. She was their mother, so she loved them. But they became inconvenient, costly, mouthy, irritating, right? But even still, she didn't have the right to off them. No, that's murder. We say that that's against the law. Our laws restrict our rights to choose all the time for the good of society. Like, if I want to drive 65 miles per hour every day on this main drag here through East Brady, if there's a cop out there, and much to the chagrin of many people right now in town, there are often cops out there, right? But he's going to pull me over, or she, and they're going to say, you can't do it, it's against the law, I'm giving you a citation. You're going to kill someone doing this. Our laws, they limit our rights all the time. The right to choose stops when it comes to the decision to end life, because life and death are not ours to wield. They belong to God and God alone. That's why abortion is an affront to God and his sovereignty and his glory. And it's an affront to human life, which by its very nature reflects the image of our almighty God, as we read in Genesis 1:27. Show us, please, Jim. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. Whether the person's in the womb or older, outside of the womb, taking that life is killing the image of God. It's an affront to God and to humans. So the question is, what do we do with this? Right? You say, what do you want me to do, Pastor? Because the law of the land allows for legal abortions, the legalized killing of these babies. What are we supposed to do about that? And I bring to you 3 points of application for today. First and foremost, we must be zealous for God's name and his glory. This is where it all starts, ladies and gentlemen. We must be so eager and so desperate to see God glorified that we will be motivated to confront anything that stands in the way. So many of the problems that plague society, I think, stem from the fact that God's people, the people who follow Jesus Christ, we are not zealous for God's name and glory. We just kind of sit back and we don't want to rock the boat at all, right? But we will confront this issue of abortion because it stands in the way of God's glory. It sets up humans as mini gods, and it attempts to rob God of his authority and his power over life, just to shove God aside. So we must love God. We must desire God so much that it drives us with passion to confront this evil, even when so many will be against us, and many will be against us, ladies and gentlemen. That leads us into our second point. We must proclaim the truth clearly, even in the face of objection. Let's proclaim the truth. Because human hearts, they're sinful. That's where we all start, ladies and gentlemen. And therefore, for people, they will seek to sin against God, whether it's conscious or unconscious. They will seek to rebel against God. So even amidst the most clever reasoning and scientific evidence that proves life begins in the womb, people out there will passionately support and argue for abortion. And to us, we'll look at it and say, it's not rational. With all the scientific proof out there that indicates that there's life in the womb, it's not rational for us that people will continue to say it's not a life, but people will passionately continue to support abortion because they have sin in their hearts. You know, last Thursday morning, it's just amazing how God works things out. Last Thursday morning, I was preparing to come in and prepare this message, because I actually prepared this message for last Sunday, right? But Wednesday afternoon, when I was here, I had done some work. I had my scriptures ready. I had in my mind, and even in some cases in a computer document, an outline of where I wanted this sermon to go and what I was going to do with it. But then Thursday morning, before coming into the church to write this sermon, I get on my social media sites, and I get on Tumblr. For those of you who don't know what it is, Tumblr is a social media site where lots of people keep blogs. And it's where I keep my Star Trek Deep Space Nine blog, because as you all know by this point, that's the best TV show ever made, right? Right? Sure it is. And so I have my blog there, but I'm also there, and people don't even know I follow them because we have similar interests. And one poster, I want you to listen to what one poster put, and it's just there for me as I got prepared to write this sermon. He wrote, "I'm a little upset right now. I was debating abortion with a couple girls at my college. They kept saying how abortion would be better than having a disability, being abused, being poor. All things I am or was. They were sitting across from me trying to convince me that those people would be better off dead. One of them openly admitted abortion was an act of killing, yet saw no moral implications in the act of abortion. It's a sad world when we think those who are poor or disabled or abused are better off dead or not existing." One of the little girls even admitted that she saw her life as more important than that of a fetus because her future was more important. It's a sad world when someone has the mentality that your education, your plans, your dreams justify murder. It was just waiting for me as I prepared to write this lesson. You see how people, they have sin in their hearts. And so they'll look past the most reasonable arguments. They'll go through great lengths to passionately defend abortion. So aside from clever reasoning and scientific arguments, we must fully know and understand and proclaim why abortion is an affront to God and his good news of the gospel. We must stand against abortion, if only for that, and we must stand publicly and loudly, not only when we're in church, not just when we're with politically like-minded people, but always and often. Maybe when we're on social media. And it gives me joy that over the past week I've seen multiple people from this congregation on social media actively crying against this activity. But, we can actively stand against abortion when we're talking about political things, political elections. We can vote for candidates who vow to protect life. I don't know what issue could be more important than that. We can be vocal about supporting people in our government whose policies do protect life. We can stand publicly and loudly when we're with friends and family. who might not know or understand the biblical truth that is here. And we could let them know. That's our job. That's our duty, to let them know. As Proverbs 31:8 says, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Did you know the Bible said that? Before I was preparing this lesson, I didn't know the Bible said that. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. The unborn cannot speak for themselves. So God commands us right here. Speak up for them. And you know what? When you do, you're going to get laughed at. You're going to get mocked. You're going to get sidelined by some people. This shouldn't surprise us because Jesus said it's going to happen. He said if they did it to me, they're going to do it to you. It's going to happen when we live and proclaim life according to the truth of Jesus Christ. When culture is driven by human sinful hearts, then people aren't going to want to hear this truth. But we must proclaim it because it glorifies God and because some will hear and consider and maybe even believe. We must proclaim the truth even when people will come against us for it. Finally, last point of application today. This one's so important. We must love in ways that care for those considering abortion or who have had an abortion. Sadly, when many women are in a situation when it seems like abortion is an attractive option, or it might to them seem like the only real choice, or maybe they've had an abortion and they're suffering and they're just looking for comfort, or just looking for a word of encouragement. Sadly, getting love and care and mercy from a Christian is the last thing they expect. They think Christians will judge them and shame them and condemn them as sinful for the rest of their lives. Sadly, today people don't see the church as a source of comfort and mercy and love. And that often is the fault of Christians, because we have not been comforting and merciful and loving. I knew a lady who once told me that she had been down to the March for Life in Washington, D.C. They have a pro-life march every January. And she said she would never go back because she saw so many of the Christians there. They were marching, and they were angry, and they were hateful, and they were mean, and they were judgmental. And she said it was the ugliest thing she had ever participated in. Now, to be fair, most people down at the March for Life aren't like that, but there are enough Christians down there behaving that way that she saw and the world sees. Conservative estimates say that 1 out of every 3 women in the United States will have or have had an abortion. That's a staggering number. And I'm reminded of Paul's admonition about love in 1 Corinthians 13 when I hear that, where he says, love. Love. You see, if all we do is rant and rail about how evil abortion is, then we're just noisy gongs doing no good for anybody. We've got to love, ladies and gentlemen. We need to be sensitive toward women who have experienced or had abortions. Let's not presume to know what they were thinking. Let's not presume to know what was going on in their lives that led to a pregnancy that they decided to abort. Let's remember that not all, but many, suffer inwardly, emotionally, and physically after having abortions. Let's just remember them and love them. I don't know who might be hearing this message today. It might be in a place where they've had an abortion, but if that's you, I want you to know that God loves you. And like all sinners, and that's every single one of us, God calls you into his loving embrace today through faith in Jesus Christ, where we all find forgiveness, where we can all find healing and hope from our brokenness and from our past. I don't come here today to judge anybody, because God doesn't come here today to judge anybody. God comes to love, and he comes to heal. That's why he sent his son Jesus Christ into this world. See, when love and mercy are needed, Christians should be the first place to get it from. The world should know that. The world should see that in us. And often we're failing at that. We need to project love into this issue. So that's the question. How are you going to project love and mercy into our culture of infant death? Certainly we must remember when we speak the truth of abortion, as we've been talking about here today, we speak it with love. We remember that there are suffering people out there. There are lost people needing to hear a word of encouragement and grace. There are women who feel they've got no place else to go. There are women who have had abortions who long to be bathed in love and mercy rather than to be painted as evil and cruel. But beyond that, what can we do? Well, you can sacrifice to volunteer at or to give money to a Christian organization that offers care and guidance to women who might be considering abortion. Like I say, many lives are saved through these ministries. Many women are drawn to choose life for their babies, but also they choose life for eternity with Christ as they learn and hear about the love of Christ when they go to these places. God is glorified through these ministries, but they need help and they need money. So, will you give? Not just will you give sacrificially? Will you give up something that you yourself want or would otherwise be able to go and have so you can continue to give money to the church that it might continue this dire ministry? Maybe it's not even there. Maybe it starts with you asking God to open your eyes, because there are a lot of things that happen in this world that we look right past. Maybe you ask God, open your eyes to see women who might be in a place where they have an unplanned pregnancy and they're thinking abortion is the only option. Or maybe you ask God, open your eyes so you can see single mothers who had considered abortion, but they chose life. Wonderful. But now life is so difficult. Life is so hard. They need help. You can be their friend. You can be their emotional support. You can send them notes. You can give them little gifts. You can sit and listen and encourage. And sometimes that's the best and simplest thing we can do if we're willing to sacrifice of our time. See, if you follow Jesus and you want God to be glorified in this world, then you have to have some sort of response to this issue of abortion. For the sake of God's glory and for the sake of those 42 million babies who are murdered each year, we must answer this. Not with timidity, but with boldness and love, with courage and compassion. We must get the balance, but we must answer to it. Don't be shamefully silent, and don't be appallingly passive. Commit yourself today to choosing life, and then go do something about it.